Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of the series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, What Am I Practicing Now? The talk was given by Elise Erro, EE, on August 1st, 2026, via Zoom. EE has been committed to a life of engaging spiritual principles and service through theater, support for the dying, and bringing enjoyment to others as a chocolatier. In this presentation, she speaks about practice as an ongoing training that we give ourselves. She describes aspects of her background and notes that practice is a way of undoing previous training in early life that led to the formation of our habitual reactions. EE considers topics that she relates to practice, such as self-observation, conscience, reminding factors, and intention. She facilitates discussion with attendees, which include some stories of communications that were made about practice by the Tibetan Buddhist teacher Garshan Rinpoche and by her own teacher, Lee Lozowick. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Elise Erro, EE.
When I first started on the spiritual path, I would, and I think a lot of people do this, ask themselves, am I practicing? And I know I used to do that. Am I practicing? I didn't really know what that was. And I was trying to figure out what is practice, what's it for, and how is this going to be of benefit to me? So spiritual practices are designed to teach us and to lead us into our own experience on a path so that we find the answers to these questions by delving into our own experience. So as I began to figure out some of this stuff, a better question arose for me, which is, what am I practicing now? And that seems to be the ongoing question. Because at some point I realized that I'm always practicing something. And sometimes it's not necessarily what I wish to be practicing. So I wanted to talk about some of those things too. And I've made a list of questions for myself and also for people who may be asking the same kinds of questions. So it's not always easy to give myself an honest answer. Am I practicing? Or what am I practicing now? But going along on a spiritual path, I have a group of people who we have a common teacher, and many people have different teachers. But the question is the same. The spiritual path is the thing that we've engaged and we're inquiring into. But I find that it's more revealing if I ask myself, what am I practicing now? So this morning when I sat down, I asked myself, how do I want to present this topic? How do I want to get into it? And so I just stopped, and I'm sitting now where I do a lot of my spiritual practices. I'm sitting in front of my altar, a puja. I am looking around, and I just stopped and I said, well, what do I see here? And when I look around, what I see is a whole lot of sticky notes. And on those sticky notes over the years, I have written myself some of the things that I wish to do on the spiritual path, some of the things that I wish to practice. So that was the first thing I wrote down. What do I wish to practice? Now, over time, having been in a spiritual school and with people who are also on a spiritual path, certain topics have come up and we have discussed them. And then I see how they apply to my life. I'm on a study group, a couple of study groups, and I do that on Zoom, and I do that right here where I'm sitting right now speaking to you. This is another way that I begin to practice by revealing to you my experiences about this topic. What is spiritual practice? So some of the sticky notes that I have that have come about from being in these groups together, which is what we call group work. One of them is, I wish to be surrendered to conscience. Now, that's a big one. I know what it's saying to me, but how can I express that to you? How do I know what is the right thing to do? What is the next right thing to do? And from doing this study for years and years and doing a lot of research with my friends, I have found a place in myself that I have learned to trust. And that is a place where I know where my conscience is and what the right thing to do is, because I know what it feels like when I betray that trust. So I have learned from experience, from practicing, that if I betray my trust, I can feel it. I have a sensation of that. And if I'm going in the wrong direction, I know how to course correct. This has taken years and years of self training and self study. I think when we start out on a spiritual path, we often have a teacher who may lead us. We have people who've been on the path longer than we have, and we may refer to them for guidance. And at some point, I have learned that what I need to do for myself, what I wish to do, is to be able to know where I am in my own work, to know what that work is, be able to stand in it, and to be able to articulate it. Am I able to stand in what is going on for me right now? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but right now. Am I able to articulate it so that those of you who are looking at me may understand what it is that I am expressing? And is it of use to you? That's another aspect of it. So, one of the things that I have realized by being on a path and being engaged in spiritual practice is that I need to know who I am. And that has led me to the practice and the study of self observation and self remembering. And there are groups that I use that and I practice that with weekly. We've been doing this for a number of years. There are actually two books. One is called Self Observation, and the other one is Self Remembering, that we read together and we discuss how the teachings in those books help us with our own self observation. So, who is it that I think I am? Well, who I think I am is not who I am. And that was a very shocking revelation to realize that who I think I am and who I may even be presenting, even here, isn't necessarily who I am. And when I began to sincerely research into this question of who am I, it led me back to, well, where did I come from? And I think this is actually an essential part of our research on ourselves, is to know and to acknowledge where we've come from, who our parents were, what our upbringing was like, so that I can begin to see what it is that's really running the course. Because those experiences in my very young life were the things that taught me to believe a certain way, to trust in a certain way. Who can I trust? Who can I not trust? And it turns out there's a lot of people that I do not trust. But I needed to do that research on myself. It was very shocking to me to have to do that. I found there was a lot of trauma in my past that I had not acknowledged, but that was keeping me from expressing myself in a certain way. I did a talk a few years ago, and I believe the name of the talk was Women Talking. And you can go back and look at this. What it was about was having to reveal what my childhood was like. That my parents, they were both CIA workers. And I was told as a child that you never tell anybody. You do not mention this to anybody, or something really bad is going to happen. So giving that talk was one of the bravest things I think I had done in all of the years that I had on the spiritual path, was to actually come out and to tell that story and not die, not have any repercussions, except that there was a response that I got from a woman in France. And when I told my story of how frightened I was to speak, she said that she was also frightened because her mother, during the war, slept with a pistol under her pillow. And she thanked me for speaking out because she realized then that she could speak out as well and tell her story. Her mother was part of the resistance, and their country was occupied. So she was coming from a family of fear. My family was using my own fear to keep me in line. However, I did find the spiritual path, and I was able to get to that place where I was able to speak out. To myself, I call that my spy that came in from the cold talk, and how important it is to speak out. I'm not telling you the whole story of my family, but I do see that the story of my family, both of my parents are gone now, but both of my parents were very much the formulators of where I am still being driven today. So there's a lot of fear in there, but the more I speak, the more I'm able to overcome that fear and tell the story. I was on a call the other day and somebody said, you don't ever talk about yourself. And I said, are you kidding me? I'm talking all the time. They said, yeah, but never about yourself. And that was a big revelation to me that maybe I'm not allowing people to know me. So what people say back to me in response to what I have to say is extremely important. And I hadn't made that a priority. So what am I practicing now with this? One thing that we study when we study self-observation, we study this practice that we call the work, came from George Gurdjieff, who was a Greek Armenian teacher who, during the Second World War, brought his students out of Russia and into France, where he established a school. One of the core principles of his teaching is what he calls the horror of the situation. And we talk about, well, what does that really mean, the horror of the situation? And my understanding of what he was talking about is that when we get to the point when we realize that we are machines, that we are a body of habits, that we're programmed by somebody else, and we don't know who we are. And that's what my understanding is of what he meant by the horror of the situation. Now, there may be others who have studied this work deeper and understand it more, but this is what I understood from what he had to say. And I wrote myself another note. It's not a sticky, but it's very close to a sticky note. So I wrote on here, why horror? And has this phrase also now become mechanical? Oh, that's the horror of the situation. When I allow myself brief glimpses of the bigger picture that I call me, I see stuff in myself like hatred, vindictiveness, payback, vengeance, impatience. These are things I do not like about myself. And my understanding is when we begin to see this in ourselves, we're beginning to get the bigger picture, the more honest picture of who we are. And I do not usually want to see these, but these are the things that are actually speaking using my voice under certain circumstances as protection, actually. They are defensive devices. So I said to myself here in my little note, let the glimpse of horror of the situation become a reminding factor to practice. Let myself remember I am a machine. There's something more here. How may I respond in a certain situation that is not vengeful? It's not payback. That was a big one for me. It's not hatred. Instead of jumping to words, to thinking, and to judging, go to the sensation. What am I feeling right now? And usually something I'm feeling is formulated by fear. It looks like fear to me. It feels like it. So then I look at the sensation. I'm holding my breath. Did a lot of that. A lot of it. I still do. Holding my breath, even now. Tensing up. The sensation of it. Those are the sensations in me of fear. It may be different for you. The thing is about self-observation is it's teaching me to train myself to see myself, to see, and to be able to practice from there. And the question renews itself. What do I wish to be practicing now? Does it involve another person? Does it affect another person? Like I said, I didn't even know that other people didn't know certain things about me. And that was a bit shocking to me. Even now, when I think I'm so much more expressive, I'm still learning that people don't really know that much about me. Oh, hang on. Cat got the bird again. Oh, man. Excuse me. Priorities. Kitty?
Okay, the cat got the bird.
Yeah, come
So we'll have a brief intermission. Well, this is an opportunity to practice. What am I practicing now? Of course, there's always an opportunity to practice. There's never not.
Oh, excuse me. The cat's found the bird's nest. I think he keeps pulling the babies out. So I got to rescue the birds. Whew.
Well, so it sounds like self-observation and practice are equivalent to you. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, I don't see any separation. Things kind of come together in that I'm seeing what I'm up to. I see what I'm up to daily. I see how I repeat myself. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I just notice these things. The other thing that I really had to learn early on was to not make an enemy of myself, not to see, oh, I'm doing habits and I'm judging people. That's what the mind does. The mind does that. Just see it, feel it, sense it, and what's next? Begin again.
I was intrigued when you said that people say you don't talk about yourself and you don't let them know who you are. And you also said that, we don't know who we are. What would it mean for you or me to feel like people, quote, know me? What is that?
Well, part of the training I got as a child was that you do not tell people. You don't let people know what's going on with you. You don't tell people. And am I hiding something? What is it about me that I'm still not ready to or wanting or willing to reveal?
No, but identification in this sort of thing, like to get to who we are, what that means. And can someone know that? Can someone know me in that way?
Well, isn't it more important that I know myself? Do I see myself as secretive?
I just wondered, can someone really know me? What does that mean?
That is a very key question for somebody who's been secretive, who's afraid to let people know who she is. But it's also deeper than that. It's like, who am I? And can I trust myself? So these are questions that arise from that basic one, like, who am I? And can I trust who I am? I'm slowly beginning to be able to trust who I am.
Is that the same as you'll hear the word authentic being thrown around? And I was wondering, though, whether trusting your conscience, what was on that sticky note?
I wish to be surrendered to conscience.
Yeah, I
And
wish to be surrendered. So would that be what you think people mean by authenticity?
I think being authentic is what I was speaking to there about wishing to be surrendered to conscience. I have learned from doing this work and making a practice of it, particularly when I betray my conscience, when I do something I know I should not have done. I have a sensation, I have a self correcting mechanism in me that knows and also knows what to do next. What's the right direction to go into? But I've learned that. I have learned that by practice. When I insult or belittle or am unkind to another person, that sense of conscience in myself, not consciousness, but conscience in myself lets me know when it has been betrayed. It's painful.
So it seems like you're describing practice as living from conscience.
That is my wish, to live from conscience. So, this idea of wishes, I think, is very important. One of the things that we study in our work group is what we call a work wish. So, what do I wish to be practicing? because practice is an ongoing training that I give myself. And what do I wish to be doing? Another one I have written down on a sticky note is I wish to make no more war on this planet. This planet is all kinds of disagreement and war. And it starts within. It starts within. Where's the war that I'm making with myself? And can I stop that? This is the way I need to be with myself and I need to be with others. Even if I disagree with someone, I can't make them wrong or bad about it. I also want to be kind to others, and I fall short of that sometimes. Can I be kind to myself? It seems like I can only be kind to others when I'm kind to myself. And when I'm not kind to myself or others, then conscience shows up again. It says, try again, apologize, forgive. And these are not things that I was brought up doing. So I had to learn them later in life. And I think maybe some of us can relate to that.
So I just want to say, in the last couple days, practice has taken on a new meaning for me. Y'all know that Garshan Rinpoche is sick.
Do you want to tell people who he is for those who may not know?
Garshan Rinpoche is at the Garshan Buddhist Institute. He's an amazing person, and I have worked there. And so what he says is practice. Don't worry, practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken on a whole new meaning for me, that word.
So is it in what you do or is it in how you see things?
It's both, because
Yeah.
you got to see it, but you got to practice. You got to do the practice, the mantras. That's it.
And he's saying, don't worry, practice.
Yeah. And I think that's the only thing we can do right now, because he may die.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And it's a teacher. It's a teacher. So he's telling us, practice, just practice. Don't think about your stuff, practice. I don't know. It's just been kind of good for me to hear it and practice.
Yeah.
Well, so Gorshin Rinpoche is a Tibetan Lama. He was in a Chinese prison for 20 years.
Yes.
So I'm not sure when he left Tibet, but he has a large group of international students who regard him as a teacher, and he's been very ill.
Yeah. So that's what's going on now. And at first, when I found that out, I was longing. I was sad. And then he puts out this message, just practice, just practice. And so that's what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm. So there are physical practices, things that we actually do, like meditation for some people, or maintaining a diet, or study, or yoga, or something. And then there's the way that we approach things. So does practice for you involve both of those things?
Yes.
It sounds like Gorshin Rinpoche is recommending that at this time for his students, they do the physical practices and maybe also remember the Dharma, the teaching.
Yeah.
Totally remember the Dharma. And that's his message. Remember the Dharma, practice the Dharma. And that's the practice. And he's totally into us doing that. And so that's the practice for me right now and for his students.
What occurs to me, one thing, is to remember that there's more to us than this separate person, the separate personality. Even if we know things about ourselves and we see our emotional reactions and we acknowledge those and tell people about them, still there's more to us than just this idea of a separate person. And that to practice is, for me, to keep that in mind, that everything is impermanent.
That's what he did a teaching today, or his Lama did, about impermanence. And he wants everybody to focus on that impermanence, the body. Yeah,
And that we're more than just this.
totally. Yeah.
So it seems like to me that until we realize that and what that is, that we practice.
Yep.
Because we have some resonance with that idea. And in fact, maybe some intuition of what that actually is sometimes.
I totally agree. And I think that practicing on those concepts is useful. Impermanence, death, karma. It's useful to me.
I often think about the Tibetan teacher Trungpa Rinpoche, who spoke about sanity, basic sanity. And I think one of the main motivations for practicing is because I recognize the insanity of my mind, of the distractibility of my emotions, the reactivity of my emotions, the dissatisfaction with life in general. You go to boot camp in order to train for a different type of life. And for me, in a very broad metaphoric sense, practice is a way of coming home to a certain type of sanity because I live within insanity.
Well, I think you're saying also, or implying, that it involves training the mind, since we're so distractible, to come back all the time to what's going on now in the present and being in relationship with that.
Mind training the emotional reactivity, also training the physical body in things like patience and endurance and flexibility and so on. So it's the full gamut.
When I look at it really closely, I've been trained to be defended against so much that has come at me as a child that I'm just habitually defended. And I need to undo that training somehow. And this is a way to do it. And then you practice being a new way.
I like the question, what am I practicing now?
Now.
Because the remembering is the hard part. Remembering to practice.
Yeah, I agree. It's the remembering part. Also, to not do this alone. We don't need to do it alone. We're here now. We don't need to do it alone. We have friends who wish to be in a work group with us, possibly. I know I do. I found those friends. If your intention is to have that work wish, it will come. If I allow help to come to me and I ask for it sincerely, it will come. It's been my experience. I mean, I've been told that it's a law that if when you ask for real help, it will come. But now it's also my experience in this description of what conscience is. Now that I know how it feels to betray myself, my own conscience, that's the help I needed, to be shown that.
One of the things you talk reminds me of this idea that when you realize that you're not practicing, that itself is practice. I heard that from somebody. That actually is practice. So in line with this idea of what are you practicing now, sometimes I realize what I'm doing is not in line with what I would like to do as practice. But that in itself has the capacity to bring me back to what my intention is.
Okay, good. So I'm glad you brought up intention, because what I intend, like I said, I wish to be surrendered to conscience. I wish to make no more war on this planet. Those are big wishes, and to remind myself of those things. So it's kind of like sailing, it's like when you go off course, you tack back. And I think that this question is a good one. What am I practicing now? Oh, getting back on course. Also, I was thinking of the value of asking a really good question of myself, which is where I came to the title of this evening, which is, what am I practicing now? And is what I'm practicing aligned with what my intention is, what my deepest wish is?
It feels to me like I have an intention sometimes
Yeah.
to be present or to be in relationship or to surrender to what shows up. And then I forget and I go back to old habits.
Yeah.
And
So what do you do when that happens?
well, that's the thing. There are some habits that are very strong and pull me back, have pulled me back. And I basically forgotten my intention for a period. Or sometimes fear will take over. Fear and desire can pull me away from practice, from my intention. And it's taken me many years to really work with some of these things and to see how I'm split, how one part of me really has this intention and another part is just taken by these other emotions or these other drives.
And that's self-observation.
Mm-hmm. And to see that that's really pretty painful and that I could run through my whole life right to the end being run by the same thing. Maybe that's what you might be referring to as the horror of the
Or the situation. Yes, it is.
But it also seems to me like heroic practice is not the kind of practice necessarily that spiritual figures from these great myths did, like Milarepa or others who did really extreme practice, but it's really about relating with reality as it is.
Mm.
Just to be with somebody, maybe that provokes a reaction in me. And I think that that's maybe the kind of practice that you're talking about.
Well, also practice being with somebody who's dying. Not very many people get to do that unless they're in that profession. And I have a friend who has told me that she loves being with the dying. She was a hospice nurse. I mean, that's the kind of person you want around when you're dying, it seems to me. But also, I think another thing that practice brings us to eventually is this whole experience of love. What is love? To say, I love being with the dying, that was very moving to me. To not be afraid of love. And if that is one of my wishes, then I also need to be able to be seen. I also need to be able to wish to be seen. And coming from where I've coming from, that takes a bit. I was a chocolatier and worked in theater. And it was my teacher who put me into the theater company. And when he did that, I realized that I did not want to be in the limelight. To me, it was dangerous. It goes back to my whole training of don't talk to anybody, don't let anybody know where you came from, don't tell anybody that your parents were from the CIA, don't tell anybody anything. It's very dangerous. You could get yourself hurt, you can get other people hurt. So that's the background that I'm coming from. And I need to remember that in order to be able to practice to lean into, basically to lean into love, to be able to be love, to be able to love, and to not be afraid of that.
Does leaning in apply to things that are uncomfortable
Absolutely.
or unwelcome?
I've got a great quote. I want to read this quote.
It sounded like leaning into fear equaled leaning into love in that case. So it's uncomfortable.
Yes. Somebody said, and I really like this, he said, when things are going swimmingly, I revert back to my mechanical self. I drift back to my habits and rely on them, I forget to self-remember. Remember we were talking about that? So when I notice in myself things that are uncomfortable, that's when I need to lean in. That's a reminding factor for myself to lean into what is making me uncomfortable. It might be a person, it might be a situation, it might be being in a situation and not saying anything. It might be being in a situation and saying something. But my clue is if I feel uncomfortable about it, my habit body's going to want to come back and grab it. Trust me. The habit body's there to protect me. It's always done it. It's done a great job. Thank you very much. But I want to do something a little bit more, a little bit different, something that's really uncomfortable.
Well, why would you want to do that?
Well, because I don't want to be a robot. The opportunity of this invitation to practice is not what I'm used to. It's counterintuitive. It's only counterintuitive because I wasn't brought up that way. It's not working from my habit body. My habit body is what's been driving me so far, and I don't wish to live that way anymore. Also, you know what? We're all aging. Things are uncomfortable. I need to get okay with things that are uncomfortable and learning how to work with those. Learning how to use those to my advantage and not being reliant on my mechanical self, my habit body, to defend me against what it's indefensible.
Practice. Oh gosh, there's so many specific practices, and people in different traditions do different things, mantras or chanting or meditating. But a lot of different things open up parts of myself so that I can relate with what is, what comes to me, and be with that and self observe and follow my conscience in response to what's going on rather than protect myself
Yeah,
and be safe. There's some risk involved in practice, I think.
there is, but there's risk on the spiritual path. Talking about the dharma, it won't let you get away with anything. And you have to be up for that. You have to be willing. Okay, I need to be willing for all of my illusions to be just proven wrong. I need to see how I'm proven wrong. All the things I think I'm right about, not necessarily. It ain't necessarily so. So I like what this person said when things are going swimmingly, I revert back to my mechanical self. Now, that doesn't mean that I need to do anything about that except to see it. And I think that that's where I have made a mistake trying to change things. Can't change things without seeing it, feeling it, sensing it. That's another direct teaching of Gurdjieff is we think we can change. We can't change. But things do change over time. That's the thing about staying on a spiritual path and doing the kind of discussions and the kind of work that we're talking about here. Looking at my intention. Does that change? Do I have a greater intention? What did my teacher say about that? Oh, he told me the reason I didn't understand something was because I wasn't seeing the bigger picture. It only took me 20 years to realize that he was telling me something about myself, to see the bigger picture. Didn't say to change anything, just see the bigger picture. I'm capable of that. There was something I wanted to talk a little bit about, and that was like learning to trust myself. Because from where I was coming from, my background, getting to learn about what self observation even was, getting a good look at myself, running into the horror of the situation. How can I trust somebody who's like so despicable? That's how I was feeling about myself. That's why I didn't want people to know me. I didn't want them to see how horrible I saw myself. I had to literally stop hating myself. And I told one of my teachers, I said, I'm going to stop hating myself. Myself's going to hate that, but I'm going to try anyway. He says, self isn't going to hate it. It's just not going to believe you. And that was a big teaching.
Well, how did you practice with that?
A lot. When it came up, self-judgment, telling myself I'm wrong, being mean to people. Wait a minute. Just take a look. That's a quality of self-hatred. And then I was doing this writing workshop, which was amazing. And one of the processes we did was to bring a picture of ourselves. And then we did a writing exercise about it. And I looked at this picture of myself and I said, how can anybody hate that person? So I had an objective look at myself. Sometimes you just need to do that. Get a picture of yourself and have a good look at it. What do you think about this person? That is on my altar now. Every day I look at that and I remember I used to be a self-hater. That's where the hatred starts. That's where the war within starts. I was sitting down this morning, like writing notes, and there are reminding factors everywhere. I look around, I have pictures of friends who are gone, teachers who are gone, people who are still alive, people I work with. Every object in this room has got a story to it. Every object. Those are all reminding factors of the work we did together.
Well, one thing I was really struck by when I first encountered the path was the idea that change happens by itself, by being with what is. Just seeing what is will generate what's needed for a change to take place. To try to become something other is a forceful process and doesn't really work so well. I would always seem to come back to old habits.
Yeah.
Your intention is what makes something practice. The same action done for the wrong reason can be just something to bolster ego and to reinforce my own rigidity. But if done with the right intention and the right spirit behind it, and with an eye towards what I want practice to manifest, which is another way of saying intention, if I approach things that way, then an action, even just a simple action of an act of kindness or an act of generosity, an act of compassion, or just some simple disciplined act, like not turning on the air conditioning when I might like to turn on the air conditioning, or the heat in the winter, or things like that, embracing small discomforts. They don't necessarily help the evolution of the universe, except that if they're done with intention and I'm making some degree of sacrifice with that intention, there is a fruit to that, I find.
So that intention would be to be with what is without trying to be comfortable all the time when there's that possibility?
Well, the intention in an exercise like that, of say not turning on the air conditioner, is to be present, to relate with reality as it is, but almost more importantly, to sacrifice my insistence upon having things my way. In Gurdjieffian terms, maybe that builds a little bit of some substance to my being by doing that.
Well, it builds your training, for one thing.
Yeah.
To choose your intention over what your egoic response would be or reaction would be.
I think I'd like to speak to something other than practice as sacrifice, even though I totally resonate with what you're saying. But I think that there's such a connection in our minds with practice as being something hard. We have to work against our animal nature and all of that. And I am much more interested in the joy of life when it's lived with the ideal of serving others, bringing joy into people's lives, bringing joy and peace into my own life, and seeing that what the teachers have offered us as practice is actually a way of feeding the heart and just filling the mind with light, So I can say I love practice. I mean, whatever you might call practice. I love meditation. I love chanting. We just had the full moon this week, and we were outside under the full moon chanting for a couple of hours. The joy of it is ecstatic communion with other people and the raising of the vibrational level in my own body and joining with others in doing that and recognizing that there's no way to prove this, but this is a way of bringing beauty into the world. So I think practice can have such a different focus than just something that's hard that I have to work against myself.
Do you think that that's something you've learned over the years to come to that?
Well, I think I trusted my mentors and teachers enough that I would give it a try. What they were suggesting, I would give a try to see how it worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own self, in my own body, I recognized its benefits. So it was more beneficial for me to start my day in silence with some reading, with some quiet walking, with some meditation, than it was to start my day by flipping on my phone. So I just followed directions from my guides and mentors, and I found that it was more joyful to live that way.
Mm.
You mentioned also service, and I see service as practice also, and it's joyful. I was just listening to someone a week or two ago from El Salvador who serves people who enter the country and have nothing. And that's her life. But she's pretty radiant. She seems pretty full in her life with doing that. Now, that's not a practice that most of us would engage in, but there is that principle of serving what we uniquely can serve and how that is very full. To me, that's a practice.
My practice now, recently, has been to serve as many people as I can, meaning friends and particularly those in need. A friend's husband just died. Another friend has dementia. Another friend's son is dying. And my intent has been to maybe just be with them or call them. And I always offer help and assistance, but they don't always need it. There's a lot of times there's nothing I can physically do. So just them knowing that I'm there for them, it's opening something inside of me. And it's allowing, I think, the divine to come in. That's what my work has been lately. And it's very fulfilling and it makes me feel joy, even though people are dying. It's joyful and it makes me happy. I think it makes them happy too.
Go back to something that someone was saying. My guess is that Gorshin Rinpoche would be happy knowing that his students were practicing in the midst of his illness.
We could practice some silence together.
That's always a great practice. However, it doesn't translate that great on podcasts.
That's true.
Right now, I'm just trying to find a rational practice, and the Gurdjieff work, it seems like a very worthwhile path. I'm glad you made me aware of it today, and I'd like to look at it some more. But my overall moral imperative right now is just my awareness of the ecological crisis and the Gaia hypothesis that the Earth is a living system that's more than just the sum of its parts. Everything that I try to do is from picking up trash in my neighborhood to just trying to be frugal with consumption has to do with trying to do my small part in trying to solve the ecological crisis or minimize my impact. I've been involved with Buddhism for a long time, and I believe in the three seals of the Dharma, which are the belief in impermanence and that nothing has a permanent ego or separate self. Everything is interconnected, and that nirvana is tranquility, and that realm actually exists as a state of being.
Teacher was towards the end of his life, he couldn't speak very well, but he was still working. And I went into his office one day because I had a question for him, and I said, "May I have a word?" The only word he gave me was practice. So let's leave with that word. Whatever that means to you, keep doing it. You will find your way.